Welcome, one and all,
Thank you, I guess.
to the inaugural podcast. Name omitted.
For now. Name omitted.
My name is Gio.
My name's Jim.
We're here to nerd out for a bit and just chat just a little bit about D&D.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking enough shit in the gym that we thought we should actually probably put this into a medium.
And this is no no dig or no shade thrown at anyone else that does this kind of thing. It's just I think we could, maybe touch on a couple of things that haven't been mentioned and draw on our own experiences and share a couple of funny moments. And
We're going to have our first disagreement already because I actually think this should be a dig.
This should be
should be a targeted dig at anyone. I think we should aim for the top.
All right,
right away.
We'll just clear that from the record.
Yes.
Starting from scratch. Yeah, we're here to, we're calling out people by names.
We start with beep a minute.
Well, I don't even know, to start off something like this. It's a big topic, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of channels with hours and hours of content, people discussing things, but throwing in our 2 cents about D&D, like how we got started, which is a funny story, and where we've kind of ended up now, because it's sort of been a long, windy road between where we started that one fateful evening and where we've ended up now being almost walking rule books.
Yeah, well, very true, very true. Obviously, still, we're not, we haven't been playing this for years. We weren't DMs from high school or anything like that. No, we're just some idiots. And we'll get more into that when we talk about the actual story. But first, maybe we should just say just a little piece about ourselves and introduce us. As I said, I'm Jim, 26, which is getting on a bit. And yeah, I'm probably... Well, me and Gio both probably, if you met us at like a footy game or something, would probably be the least people you'd expect to be playing D&D. Sorry, Gio, if I categorised you.
Hence why it's a podcast and not a video, mate. You've got to keep the faces in.
Very, very true. No, we're just some larrikin footy boys, basically, essentially. But we sort of just fell in love with this whole shebang. It's like a little outlet. We never, for example, you've never been into fantasy really before, like books and things like that.
Not really. I mean, the look on people's faces when I say, not a Harry Potter man, not a Lord of the Rings man, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, all of that. It's just, you know what? Put me to the sword, but
not a great way to start the podcast, Gio.
Yeah, really not. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, the target is on the back. I'm a bit the opposite. I've always been into Lord of the Rings and that sort of stuff, but never to the point where I had miniature figures or something in my room. Yeah, no shade on anyone who does that or anything, but not really my thing.
Look, now I suppose it's my turn. My name's Gio, or Geordie, 25 years old, hairline, 45 years old. It's just been one of those things. I think it all started just vaguely, probably before COVID. That got me started into D&D, and yeah, we kind of toyed with it a little bit, but we were just a bunch of fools sitting around a table who had no idea what to do.
100%.
I think we kind of just stopped when we made our characters for the first time. It's like, backstory, anything like that doesn't really matter. We're just here to have a bit of fun and roll some dice, and D&D is probably, their experience is going to be different for every single person, but everyone's going to want something slightly different out of D&D.
100%.
And if you're one of those people that wants to just sort of feather around the rules and more or less just have a bit of time to catch up with your friends and do something that doesn't revolve around getting pissed, then it's probably a good one. But it's an easy rabbit hole to fall into.
Yeah, it really is. It's actually a really good point you make. We have one of our friends who plays with us who said the reason that he was our friend beforehand, but not as we didn't see him that often, sort of thing. Didn't go out with him or anything like that on nights out. But he said that playing D&D actually brought him into the group, which was really cool when he said it, and I didn't even realise it because it was so organic the way it happened.
Well, it's a nice thing because obviously you're more inclined to spend time with people who you have matching interests with, and this is just a nice little thing. I believe I've told you this before, Jim, but even my dad, for example, will have a couple of mates over, once a week, once every 2 weeks, and they'll just sit around, drink a lime cordial, and play a game of crib or two. And that's just, I don't know, it's a funny example, but it's a nice little wholesome thing because, as you get older, without those common little hobbies, it's just, what are you doing? Want to go get a beer? That is it, and that's a saving grace of this game. Is it's a good excuse to spend a couple of hours with your friends just mucking around and being a bit silly.
Yeah, there's a lot of silliness to be had at our table. I'll be the first to say that this is not the table where you'll see people crying over character deaths and stuff like that. No.
Crying over spilt beer.
Crying over spilt beer, maybe. But that is about it.
Hence why this is a podcast and not like a live version of the show, as well, as I feel like it might be a little bit too risque, and some of the things that we covered might not be the most PC.
I think, people would probably get sick of us just cracking up laughing at inside jokes and things that aren't funny but are hilarious to us that we just can't get over.
Yeah,
it's probably not that good. Maybe we should jump in and talk about how we actually started, actually getting into it. So I think that's actually a really funny story.
Go for it. Anyway. You'll probably want to take this off because you're the one who brought this beautiful game into our lives.
Yes, I was. So, funny way this happened was I was at I was at this house. So we're at this house that I'm in right now. My girlfriend had people over, so just some of her friends, and they were out in the living room. I don't claim to know what they get up to, but anyway. And I was sort of just bunkered out in the bedroom, and for some reason they'd cracked a bottle of red wine, but not drunk any of it. So I walked out to get some food, saw the bottle, and thought to myself, someone's got to drink it, right? It might as well be me. So I went into my room and basically put down an entire bottle of wine, and I just got recommended a D&D video on YouTube, and just, mindlessly scrolling. And I watched it, and I was like, what the fuck is this? What are we doing here, boys? But I also was drunk. So, the thing I did after that was I messaged one of my family friends who's a lot older. I hadn't spoken to him in 5 years. And just drunkenly messaged him and said, you know about D&D? And he's like, yeah, I play it all the time. It's like, he's a big nerd. And I was like...
Hope he doesn't say this.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Sorry, bud. And I was like... I said something so stupid. I was like, send me some. As if there was it was a Pokemon that we were trading or something like that. I was like, send me some. He's like, right. 2 weeks later, I get the Essentials pack, the big box.
Yeah.
Come out, and it came in, and there's something about a pack. You know what I mean? I was just like, whoa, this is sick.
Instantly transported back to your childhood, unboxing the Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Oh, mate, it was so good. And I was just looking through I'm pretty sure I didn't even read the rule book until 2 weeks after I had it. I was just looking through pretty much just the art, to be honest.
You got the art, you got the dice, and for someone who hasn't played this game, seeing that dice can come in all different shapes and sizes was definitely the thing that started a future crippling dice addiction that I'm still trying to manage my way through.
Yeah, you've got a lot of dice, but it's neither here nor there, is it? Yeah, I think that's basically it. It was a risky message in my mind sent out to the boys. Hey, boys, do you want to play some D&D? But resounding result was yes. God, yeah. So we had the boys round on a Sunday afternoon. Everyone's peeling through the tiny, the little rules book in the pack.
The little razor-thin book with next to no rules.
Yeah, and, 3 races and 3 characters.
Well, you can imagine some people here who have never heard or had anything to do with D&D.
Yeah.
You get this big book put in front of you and you're like, make a character. And I'm sitting there like,
yeah.
What? So I've got to roll some dice for some stats.
Yeah.
What does this mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, just pick one of them. I'm sure it'll be fine. It's just, we went in completely blind, which was... which was okay to a point.
I remember we had this YouTube video of some guy making basic how to make a character, and we just kept replaying bits of it because we just couldn't work it out. And I remember so vividly when they were doing. I know this sounds so stupid now, but at the time they were doing the modifiers on the skills.
Yeah.
And I had just got into my brain that with dexterity that works for sleight of hand and stealth, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't understand the proficiency at all. So when he was like, and you got a +4 for this, and you have a +2 in, you have a +4 in stealth, and you have a +7 in sleight of hand, I was like, what? Where's this extra 3 coming from? What is this? And that confused the hell out of me.
Well, to that case in point, it's probably good that we're here having a chat. So, if you people listening, the thousands of esteemed listeners that we have, kind of hear this and think, oh yeah, we're in the same boat, and that's maybe why we might have stopped or playing or put it down. It's one of those things you can't just dabble into.
No.
You can to a point, but if you want to have any kind of consistent sort of fun and progression in the game, which is what everyone kind of wants to a point.
Definitely.
But what, I'll take the reins here for a bit. So we played this session, all of us went in completely blind. We were, if anyone here is familiar with the Dragon of Ice Biopeak, that book was one of the first ones we played. And one of the first things to do is at the top of this hill, there is a little old windmill or something like that was being attacked by a manticore.
Correct.
A real griffin looking thing. Just yeah, not good news. And we were like, oh, well, level 1.
Let's just fucking smoke him.
Packed up with like a full 8 hit points each. Moseyed on out the hill and just got absolutely slaughtered. And, you know, to your credit, having not run a game before, it's one of those things where you probably think like, oh, you know, maybe this is just meant to happen. But we were there being like, what the fuck? Like, what do we do? Like, are we meant to, you know? And I distinctly remember there was a part of... I don't think I understood how the game worked because there was a person who was like in charge of the town and they were like in their house not wanting to have a chat, and I kept knocking on the door and trying to say different things because I thought it was like this game where, you know, you got your dialogue boxes and I was like, maybe if I say the right thing.
Playing Skyrim in real life.
Yeah, I spent like a best part of half an hour just pestering you, the DM, to try and politely tell me to fuck off.
Yeah.
But at that point I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I have no fucking idea what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, that's so funny that you say it, because, like, I remember so well when you were doing that, I was like, I'm fucking up the game by not talking to him, aren't I? I'm doing something wrong. And the book was like, he won't come out. And I was like, well, why not? Like, I didn't understand. And I was trying to do it, like, the thing, like, we'll get into this later, like, in terms of, like, styles of DMing, but, like, I really dislike, and this is just me, this is not anyone else, this is just me, I really dislike following a book. Because in my mind, the characters are different in my head to what they are, as written. So, like, from the start, I was bound to fail in that regard because I just couldn't stay on the same page as the people I was trying to control.
Well, to that point, we kind of ended up playing for a little bit and, you know, having a little try, swapping around with DM, stuff like that.
So I jumped out after one session.
Well, one of our other friends took the reins and thought, hey, we'll have a bit of fun with this. And we just, I don't know, you know, all credit to this person who tried their best from a limited base of knowledge to try and take us through one of these games and following this book, but... It kind of just got stale after a couple of sessions.
I think I played. I actually fell out of it first. So I DM'd the first session, played the next 2, I think, and then you guys were like, "Do you want to have a crack at D&D?" And I was like, "You know what? Nah, like I'm not that interested." And I had a good 6 months. 6 months on the pine, you know, resting up.
Well, I mean, that's probably, you know, everyone's going to like it and dislike it. But we continued, but we soldiered on through. I think there was 3 of us for most of the time. One member kind of came through and copped a swift kicking out, but that's a different story.
We'll get on to the story of Flame, the Trailblazer, in due course. That is a great story, but not today.
And one day out of the blue, I think... I don't know if this was just, you know, maybe, you know, all credit to you, and I'm not taking a personal dig here, but I think you kind of, after a while, this might have been the case. We were still playing D&D, and I was still getting really into it. Full nerd immersion, I'd started to really understand some of the rules and the classes and the characters.
Sure.
But after a while, I think you were like, oh, can I come back along?
Yeah.
And, you know, reason for that not really mattering too much, but from that point, I think we kind of realised that the most fun you're going to get out of the game is the fun you make for yourself.
Yeah,
because all of these source books and everything like that, and anyone who's looked and flicked through a source book, it's very, very bare bones. And I think that's the mistake that we fell into we read it as bare bones, so we took it as bare bones. They're meant to be a guide to be built on and expanded on.
Absolutely.
And that kind of culminated when we decided making our own sort of, what would you even call it, like...
whole thing,
starting from the ground up, starting fresh continent, fresh cities, people, all of that stuff, and it was.
We go on to that. I just want to say real quick, the reason that I came back was one night I was hammered again. Believe it or not, you're not going to believe that. And I was just fucking around watching King of the Hill, and I was like, I was kind of not feeling left out because I would always come at the end of like the D&D session and we'd start like drinking or whatever after that. So like I wasn't worried or anything like that, but I was like, in my head I was like, why don't I just have a crack at it again? Like why not have a try? And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? And this will go down in history as the thing that got me back into D&D. I made Hank Hill a barbarian character and put him into this deadly serious, because it was really serious, because it was like these characters you built from the handbook. It was like, you know, what, like an elf wizard whose parents died, someone else whose parents died, you know, all this sort of stuff. And then
that is the carbon copy, like, starting thing of, you know, tragic backstory, everyone he's known has died. But anyway, then comes along a man with a set of tongs.
Yeah, and I just decided in my head, like, I didn't want to, like, fuck with anyone, but I wanted to do it, to be fun for me.
Yeah.
So instead of, they were like, oh, I was making this character, and I still didn't really super understand the making of it, and I remember one of my friends was like, oh, and you get 2 hand axes, and I was like, oh, fuck that, can I get 2 cans of WD-40? Like, use that? And then our DM at the time was like, yeah, of course you can. Like, why not? And I was like, this game is sick. Yeah, sorry, just a bit of a tangent there.
No, well,
that's so funny, and that sort of dumb stuff is what I like a lot about D&D as well.
That's everyone has their like little crystallizing moment of like, I can do fucking anything in this game. If I want to be in like a any type of setting at all, like a medieval setting or like a really old country setting, and you want to put in cans of WD-40, me as the DM, fucking, I'm going to try and make that happen and try and like quantify it within the game as best as I possibly can.
It's a magic propane barbecue.
Yeah.
So.
The +1 propane barbecue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just sort of blew up from there, didn't it? I think after a couple of sessions of playing Hank, I was like, all right, I'm actually really enjoying this. I'm going to make a proper character now. And yeah, it sort of just blew up from there. And I've made billions of characters since. Sometimes I'll just sit at home and just make a character.
Well, that's part of the fun, and that's where all the coming and creating your own world and doing some homebrew world building comes in as being such a really fun thing to do. Because I distinctly remember it was around the time that you decided to start making a campaign. I was stuck at home. This was COVID. Everyone was self-isolating and stuck in the house, and I was like, oh, I'm stuck inside for 7 days. And at that, I was pretty much stuck in my room for 7 days because parents upstairs. This was, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, there's only so many times you can jack off before you're like,
you really put that on the first episode of the podcast. You really, I just want to make it clear that was Gio who said that, not me. Sorry, go on.
But yeah, so I messaged you and I was like, entertain me, please. I'm bored as hell. And from that point, you were like, okay, try building your own world.
Yeah.
I came back and I was like, where do you start? He was like, wherever you want. So he gave me this little sublet of islands off the big continent, and he said, go absolutely crazy on them.
Yeah.
So, you started from the foundation of making these islands, and you think to yourself, like, who's going to be on these islands? What are the cities? What are the races? What are the cultures? What has happened in the past in order to make it where it is now? And before you know it, you've dropped a fair amount of time into this.
Yeah.
And it is fun.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, even before that, I think we were just at that point, just in that sort of expanding and spreading our wings into D&D.
Ah, yes.
And we were just doing like source book shit, essentially. Like, I think we're still doing Dragon of Ice Spire Peak, which we ended up dropping afterward because it's kind of boring, no offense, it's
not a great way to get players into the game.
And I think what happened was our normal DM wasn't going to be available. Is that right?
Yeah.
But then he was at the actual. It all happened it all worked out for the best. But the idea was, someone was like, "Oh, who's going to DM?" And I was like, "Fuck it, it'd be really funny if I did a one shot with some dumb shit." And I was like, "Well, all right, I'll do it." Put my hand up. I at this point I know the least about D&D out of the entire group, so this was a great decision. And I had like, how do I put this? I've always had like this interest in like, not world building as such, but like I love, like, my favorite game ever is Skyrim, and I loved like drawing little maps and shit like that about it and ideas and stuff. So I just drew. I actually had already drawn, like, just in the past for fun, this map of this place. I think it was because I was inspired by Game of Thrones at the time, and I wrote out my own sort of thing. Some of it was so copied, it was ridiculous. But anyway, and I just looked at it and I was like, I can make this work. So I focused on this like one aspect of it, and we'll get into this later. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I started with my thing, which is always going to be like character building.
Yeah.
So I started with this one small place, and as I did it, I was like, shit, this is actually really fun. Like you said, like, you just lose time, and you've always, like, especially for me, I've always been pretty creative in terms of like just writing and stuff like that. I'm just having like ideas like bam, 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 like people I can chuck in, and like, obviously being us, there's so many like little funny Easter eggs and stuff that we put in, like people we know in real life and stuff like that. And I was just sitting there just laughing half the time, and we played it. We literally just started playing it, and it was such an awesome feeling because everyone had fun at the time, you could tell. And we packed up, and everyone said to me was like, That was sick, mate. Like, when are we doing it again? And there's nothing better to hear as a DM than, when are we playing next? It was so good.
That little bit of enthusiasm. Of, You know, it's very, very easy to finish a session, because not all sessions are going to be, you know, guns and blazing glory.
God, no.
But it's a pretty nice pat on the back to have everyone else, you know, when they're packing up saying, you know, nice work, did an awesome job, or when are we playing next?
Yeah, nice one. And that was the birth of my continent, which is of course named Jim Storia. Get a more serious name for a continent than Jim Storia.
The ego definitely didn't take a hit with that one.
I didn't think too hard about it. I was like thinking of a name, and I'm thinking all these like cringy like historic names, like Iron Reach, stuff like that. And I was like, nah, Jim. I think it was just Jim at first. Like, the content was, because I didn't think this was going anywhere. As I said, I thought it was a one shot until we actually started playing. I was like, I can do something with this.
You had it in pen, and you're like, Jimtopia. Jim.
It was Jimtopia. It actually was Jim. It's true. It was Jimtopia. But, and this is kind of embarrassing, my girlfriend always calls me Jimster, and I was like, fuck it, Jim Storia. Like, it makes perfect sense.
That's not too far of a reach from Jimster.
Well, as I say, my brain more went into the world building than the naming. Naming has never been my thing. But yeah, that was it. That was a start.
I'd say that's probably one of the hardest things in D&D is naming, because the amount of names you are like pumping through when you're talking about a town. You're like, okay, need a name for the town, need a name for the people in charge, need a name for the tavern, for the convenience store, for the inn, and then who's running these things. And then before you know it, you're like, okay, say the bartender is an elf named Iris, and you're like, okay, you've got a character. And then from that point, it's like, are they just going to be an NPC sitting there that just does not act and affect in real time until you go up and talk to them? Or, you know, do they have a certain like or hatred for someone? Like, who are their allies? What are they working with? How do they feel about certain things going on in the world? And then before you know it, you've spent 10, 15 minutes on one character. And
that gets
amplify
that dialogue.
Yeah. It's nothing more heartbreaking than going and building this giant sort of area to be explored, or give like a giant area of exploration, and your party's just like, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to go over here instead. Yeah. And the last thing you want to do is railroad anyone into any kind of like. You don't want to play a linear path. I feel like that's more source book material. Yeah. You want, like, people want to be able to feel like their actions in game affect the world around them.
So that's a really good point, actually, and that's sort of one of the things that really made this whole take off. Was like, I really focused on, I didn't make like a continent where I knew, you know, this town's here, this town's here. I actually made that up as it pertained to the story. I had my first sort of big place, and maybe I think there was one more town next to it or something like that. Yeah. And I just thought of the characters, and I only had like 7 characters of actual note in this first town. And they're the only ones I took any interest in. And I'm pretty sure I killed 3 of them off in the first 5 minutes. So I think for me, it was like, that the bug for me was definitely, I caught the bug rather, when I realised how fun it was to make your important characters, and you know, you keep them, and you know what they're doing and their interests, stuff like that. But half the fun for me is making up just, you know, someone walks into a shop and they go, who's behind the bar? And you don't know. You're just like, there's a dwarf called Gregory Helms. And, you know, you just go in on that. And we had some amazing characters that I just made up on the spot at the time. And because they were so, not well done by me, but like the interaction between that character and the players was so good. I just like, fuck it, I'll just chuck a few more bits in their pantry.
That's the thing is, like, one thing that I love to do is to feed off the group. So if they're saying, if they go up and just talk to this random character that's a hermit in the outskirts of town, and decide that they've got, you know, a bit of an affinity to him, it's like, you know what? Make him more important. Think on the spot, and you can add in things. And as long as you keep notes, that's okay. I mean, if you think about some of the characters that we've had that have now spanned many campaigns, like Tim Tammons.
I was just about to say, Tim Tammons started as
a humble fisherman.
He was a referee for a fishing contest.
Oh, yep.
And I didn't know his name, and they said, what's the referee's name? Which I don't know why, I just didn't see that one coming. So I was like, and I just saw a packet of Tim Tams, like, Tim Tammons. And now, 2 years later, Tim Tammons is a lich. So yeah, things can change really quickly.
That's the beauty of it. And I don't know, like, a lot of the jokes and things we have are that unbelievably niche and that unbelievably unfunny.
Yeah.
That it's something only we could like, but it's just those little plot hooks, those tiny little things that just span campaigns. You know, let's say, for example, someone comes through. We've got a classic here. One of my favourite characters that I've ever created by the name of Colin Bismarck III. He is just this paladin who is definitely about 20 or 30 years on in his career. Definitely thinks of himself as this noble, righteous individual, but, I mean, his waistline is getting bigger than his ambitions at this point. Yeah. And and the beauty of it is, as we've discussed, the Bismarck name now has become a staple across the continent in past and in future.
It's so funny.
You can throw in a last name anywhere, you know, a royal family. What royal family they marry into? One of the Bismarcks.
Yep, exactly.
You know, they're like a continuing lineage, and all it does is, it doesn't need to become directly related to all the campaigns and things we've run in the past, but it's just the kind of thing that you'll mention it, and you look around the table and everyone kind of gives you the nod and the little side eye, and you're like, yeah, I see you.
Yeah. And it's so funny that you bring up Colin Bismarck, third of his name, because, correct me if I'm wrong, he was used in one session only. He was only played in one session. That's it. And yet he has stood the test of time. As, you know, we've had these characters that we played for, like, you know, months at a time. Nah, give me that one Thursday night in February. Colin Bismarck one last time.
He just had a bravado about him, and it was just one of those characters that is
respectfully
respectfully immortalized in how we've played. I think the context of that one session was the well-loved Jim Storia. You kind of opened it up a little bit as more of like a collaborative world building, and said take the reins to one of our other friends who decided to run some kind of session hundreds of years ago in one of the smaller little provinces, and that was all that it started. And then right after that session, I looked at you and I was like, he was around 500 years ago, and I'll be damned if he's not still here today, or at least someone following his name. And it's just, it's all about giving everything a little bit of flavour. Yeah. It's not this is, you know, Colin Bismarck, the overweight paladin. This is Colin Bismarck, the valiant fighter, third of his name, years past his prime, but has an unwavering sense of justice, and his family name and reputation precede him to no end.
And we're still making up shit to do with him now.
He's been immortalised within our group, I think.
Yeah, so for a little bit of context, we're playing a campaign now that's probably, at this point, probably 900 years, I believe, on from the original Colin Bismarck one, in terms of Jim Storia age, which is very fluid. But I've just introduced this character, this like noble family, and they've got like their own, you know, surname that's been made up, and we're just finding out now that their double-barreled name is Lancaster Bismarck, you know, and it's just stuff like that. Like, that just makes it, and it's nothing, but it makes it so much more funny.
And it's not even like a plot hook or a storyline. It's not
it's not going anywhere.
It's like you don't want a metagame. Everyone at the table knows, but your characters would probably have no idea who this. Maybe the name Bismarck might have reached their ears at one point or another, but not enough to start burrowing down this rabbit hole and completely derailing the story. It's just enough for a little bit of a chuckle amongst everyone, and you move straight on past it. Like,
wouldn't it be so funny if we had like a character that just got obsessed with finding out about Colin Bismarck, just spent their entire campaign like going to libraries and asking people about it?
Either like a wizard, or even like a paladin who's just taken the oath of Bismarck or something like that. Like, he needs to know.
That's my next character.
Yeah, I mean, Colin Bismarck, the 27th of his name.
Really interesting. You said before. I'm just thinking about the collaborative world building. Really interesting to touch on. That's something we really like. That's what we find really fun, is these connections. So when I made this first continent, I made it huge. And I never expected at any point to have it all in this one campaign. I only wanted one little province and maybe a little bit of another one, but that was it. And since then, all I had was like these 3 ruling councils or whatever that ruled different. I think there were like 12 provinces or something ridiculous, and they had like a couple each.
Who were they? Like the Crag Council.
There was the Crag Council, who were like dwarves. Yeah. There was how simple is this? And then there was like an empire, which was sort of a bit of everything. And they were the main force, and there was like Elvish Command.
The Elvish Command,
and they were the elves, and they were pushed over to the side, and we never went over to the east side of the island until later.
Well, that's the beauty of it, because you just leave. When you make something at such large scale, I think a common misconception is you need to go ahead and flesh everything out. If you sort of rein in a bit and then focus on fleshing out a particular province or 2 particular provinces in which you want the story to, you know, be a part of, then you can go from there and you can move on, and you can kind of hint and tease at the idea of things happening in other provinces at the same time without any need for that. And that's, you know, you don't want to run yourself completely stupid trying to world build an entire
No.
continent that spanned somewhere between 12 to 15 provinces or something like that. There was so much, and it's like that's a big size. It's not going to be one town per province. You've got landmarks. You've got all countryside, cliffs, rivers, lakes, mountains, tundras, anything you can think of.
Yeah.
That's enough to drive a man crazy, especially coming back to the naming everything.
Oh, yeah, exactly. No,
Thank you,
true.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly right. My new best friend. Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I don't think at any point any of us have ever really had that happen, where we've had just too much. So we've always been...
I have.
Yeah?
I've gone ahead and fleshed out way too much stuff, and it's a common trap to fall into, especially for DMs, because then you get really almost antsy and complacent when you feel like, they're not going to uncover this little bit of lore that ties everything all together, and you've just kind of got to rein it in and, I suppose, sort of control your expectations a bit, because the one thing that I've found out more than anything was never try and predict your players' movements. This little side campaign that I ended up running, went by the name of the Sunset Archipelago, which was off the eastern coast of Jim Storia, still under the command of the Queen's?
Yeah, it was the Empire.
The Empire's command. Yeah. So it was just a couple of small islands that had like a rich history in being inhabited by kobolds. But anyway, we flash forward to the current day, and I'm here trying to plan this really... not a good and bad campaign, but a lot of like intrigue as to these different groups that seems to be popping up everywhere. And God bless all of you guys. All the characters that you made just turned pirate. Like you had an ex-pirate captain wannabe, you had an assassin, and you had a kobold who had just fallen through the Fae and had no idea where he was or what he was doing, who was slowly and eventually corrupted by the other two until... it reached a climax in the conclusion of the campaign. But talking about, not wanting to over-prepare or try and preempt actions, there's one moment that I knew exactly why I should never do this. So they wanted a ship, and I know they wanted a ship. So in this Port Sunset, was the biggest port in the archipelago, and they spent a lot of time around this port, and they'd kind of just gotten to the point where you guys wanted to seafare, you wanted to go out and travel, and you'd kind of realised that with your sort of pact that you'd made.
Yeah, I was playing a giant Fathomless Warlock, which I really enjoyed. Fathomless Warlock and Swashbuckler, which was a mistake in terms of actual play, but in terms of how I like the flavour, it was so pretty.
Talking about ego, would you mind reminding me of what this character's name is?
Captain. Oh, now I should take that back. Commodore Jim Kingdom.
Yeah. Anyway, so I had this ship in mind, and I was like, this is awesome. There's going to be a merchant ship coming in to which you guys would be contracted to go and do a little job with them. And from that point in time, would then be able to take control of the ship to do a couple of jobs working on behalf of this merchant company before having the ship for yourself and being able to go and do as you see fit.
All very above board.
All very above board, but this was not how this party worked. So I mentioned it very explicitly, and probably a little bit too explicitly, that there was a new ship that looked to be at port there. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give them the day to go and do everything, because it seems a little bit too convenient to have, oh, there's a ship, something happens with the ship. You got to sort of blend it into the story a bit. Of course,
let's be real.
So, they've got a day. What could they do in a day? The first thing Jim turns to me and says, I'm going to sink that ship. And to his credit, it worked out very, very well through a couple of very under the table, sneaky style of what I call it, pillaging almost. You decided to go under the water with water breathing. You were
very useful tool.
Too useful for this.
In a Sunset Archipelago style sort of campaign.
And just a couple of Eldritch blasts muffled by underwater, which I was more than happy to let be next to silent, considering there was no one on the ship or around the docks. The boat just slowly started sinking, and what did we see later? There was the other two by the name of Telia the Kobold and Jax the Rogue, just sitting there on the beach, probably about 200 feet upstream. And from that, you just see Captain, at the time, Jim Kingdom, walking out from the water with an Eldritch dart in his hand. And you just see in the background, over the sunset, this ship just slowly sinking. And I was like, so that's essentially me just picking up a couple of pages I'd prepared, just tearing them up.
Yeah.
They're not important anymore. Don't worry about that, Gio.
It's even funnier, like... like there's two things that stand out for me. That was a very funny day, and you DM'd that so well. And I am thankful for that because you let me have so much fun with that. I came out, my character came out of the water, and Telia, who was at the time very like lawful at the time, you know, looked at me like, "Do you do that?" Nah, mate. And then the best part, we got all the stuff that was being imported out of the boat and took it to the shop where it was supposed to be going and said we found it and got it back and got some money out of it.
And that pretty much funded quite a lot of your antics. I remember you tried to procure a couple of cannons with that. Probably didn't pay the whole bill, but just to that point, you've got to be prepared for players to do anything. Like even them coming in and saying how much gunpowder will 500 gold get me. As a DM, like, you know, like I know how much things are worth to a point, but like if you go up to any DM and ask them how much in weight to the ounce can you buy it for 500 gold pieces, I'm pretty sure you'd spin a couple into a mad spiral. But to your testament,
the next question was, how much gunpowder would I need to blow up an entire ship? So I kind of put you on the burner then, but it all worked out for the best. We didn't end up blowing up the ship thanks to the bad guy in the end, but don't worry, guys. We got our revenge.
Got our revenge. To that point, it's probably a little bit evident that I'm very much a plot-driven DM. I love coming up with really convoluted plots of political intrigue and the line between good and bad being incredibly subjective to, what side everyone's on. And, there could be noble causes coming from both sides, but it's picking this, who does the party want to side with more and trying to preempt that's just a trap. But it's one of the things that I've really been trying to work on in my own DMing, and that kind of sort of contradicts your style of DMing, where you're very person focused and giving the sort of how would you say, like, giving them more of an effect in the world, giving them their own opinions on things and maybe their own who would they have as like their own people that like their confidants, the people they trust, the people they distrust, their relationships and ideals towards certain groups of people. And with that, you can create very, very powerful characters that I can attest to are very, very good fun for the PCs to interact with.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan. My favorite thing in D&D is role playing, like talking. So that's, you're obviously going to be the thing you're going to be best at as a DM is the thing you enjoy the most. So I base pretty much all my campaigns on like the characters that are in it, and not just the player characters, like the NPCs as well. Like I make sure that every time it's not like, if we go back to that example of the town leader hiding behind the door. Yeah, it's not just this one track that they don't come outside the door. They're scared. You know what I mean? Yeah. I love I'm a huge fan of the idea of what you say and what you do with someone affects where the story goes.
And just because they are bad doesn't mean they're always going to be bad,
Do love me and not bad guy.
Being a bad guy, but like a noble bad guy. And that's something that I'm trying to put into this campaign I'm currently trying to write. Is one style that I think we've never really covered is there being an oppressive evil force right from the get-go. Yes. And then it's not a case of... It really limits, but in a good way, the amount of backstory. Because I kind of presented them with this content and said, hey, all I really want from your character is to hate this person who is the now Sultan of the city that governs the entire continent.
And I can't wait to play
that can be a very powerful line. And I kind of thought, okay, neighbouring cities, what has he done there? So maybe give them ideas for characters, like he shut down a bard college, which pretty much drove that city out of all its money, because all the money coming in from the people coming there to study just disappeared. Imposing taxes and tariffs on trade routes, meaning that, people weren't able to actively go and sell their goods. Just a couple of little ideas that really kind of fleshes out the world.
Do you find that doing it from this, having this one, I guess he's probably the most important character in the entire story, the bad guy, in terms of his effect on the rest of the world. Do you find that helps you more with where you can take a plot? Or do you find it gives you more of a blank canvas where, based on the interactions with that person, you can develop a plot from there?
You can develop a plot from there. Obviously, it's not going to be a case of, oh, you go and you try to kill him. Everyone can weave their backstories into, okay, maybe they used to serve the Sultan, or the old Sultan before this one took over. Maybe they were one of the sons of someone who had been taken out of business by the Sultan's actions in the neighbouring cities, or it can be endless as long as there's that sort of driven plot and want to like actively go and take down the Sultan.
Yeah.
But how they do that is completely up to them, because in this city, everyone has been oppressed so hard that they are all like benevolently subservient to the Sultan, to the point where they will turn on friend to save their own skin. And being in a place like this where guards everywhere and a big hierarchical, is that the word?
I think so, yeah.
Like level of living, you know, how are you going to take down the Sultan? How are you going to figure out more about him? Because it's not a case, you can't just get up there and take him out.
Yep.
You may be really strong characters, but, you know, are you going to choose the sneaky route where, you know, maybe they might try and take out someone who's very, very close to the Sultan and assume them?
Yep.
And, you know, like assume on their appearance and try and figure out more, like, this power that he has, how did he get it? How will you try and stop it? And it just becomes more intrigue while also being a little bit sort of grim and dark. And because of that, the people and the player characters are seen as bad guys. But in the sort of in the context of the city, but, you know, are really doing bad things for the right reason.
Yeah, I really like that. Like I say, I'm a big fan of like getting the characters to choose their own. I like playing it, and I like DMing where the characters decide what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Example A1, sinking the ship.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm obviously really looking forward to this campaign when it finally comes out.
I mean, we've done a little session 0, which was admittedly really fun. I wasn't really expecting it to be anything more than just, you know, make some characters, learn some stuff about the world, but I really want to try and bring in some different things, stuff that we haven't really done too much. I really like the idea of like time and skill challenges within combat and things like that, where the goal isn't like, yes, you've got something, but what if you are faced with an enemy that you can't possibly beat, and you either need to buy time or need to do something in order to stop them? Similar to like a lich and a phylactery. Like, you know, you might not be able to take out a 9th level caster, but the most you can do is destroy the phylactery.
Yeah.
With that in mind, though, I think we might just take a short break for a bit.
Yep,
and
grab a beer and go from there.
No worries.
We'll be back in a second. Welcome back. Still in the pod cave.
Still.
Couple of burgers down the hatch.
Yeah, God, I'm feeling a bit bloated.
A couple of beers. And we're back into talking shit about D&D. How's that for a name?
I don't know. I'm not quite as PG as perhaps.
Well, I don't think we, you know, some of the... Never mind. You know what? Forget about it. I know we went off on a few tangents in the first half, but I wanted to narrow it down a little bit. And one thing that I think is really pertinent for our first podcast is talk about like this idea of world building that we touched on before, and what makes a good world in our games, in other people's games, things like that, you know, things we've seen. So let's start with ours. Going back to this idea of this huge continent of Jim Storia, I think it was really, really the best bit of world building we did was actually the collaboration between you and me, talking about the Sunset Archipelago and how it would run, and things like the crossover between the mainland and this island, and the, you know, the structure given by this empire who were in charge, even though they're quite far away. And I think that just really like brought to life the campaign, to be honest. Like it was so lived in before we even got there, you know?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the goal, I suppose, when it comes to like creating a campaign, is you want it to feel like an organic, lived-in, explored place.
Yeah.
And you can kind of achieve that through a lot of crossover. And it's kind of nice that if you have gone, like, I'm going to sound like a broken record here just to change things up, like having already been through campaigns and starting new ones in a similar or same region, it just kind of adds to the lore and to the world building when you're players, and when you together as a group are kind of collectively adding to that world building based on what you do in the game.
So we never at any point, like, there was a bit of like, oh, no, that won't work because, you know, in this other campaign at the same time we got this happening, so it's just not possible.
Yeah.
But we always tried to, like, if one of us wanted to put something in, as long as we could justify it to make sense, that was fine. Like, we never had it was never like when I said to you, oh, you should use, like, you know, my continent and put a bit of, like, I never said to you, oh, by the way, this is how everything runs on your
Well, there was a couple of times where I was like, going back to our main man Tim Tammons, I was like, I'll mind if I include him in a little part, and you turned to me deadpan and said, Tim Tammons is dead, mate. It's like, fucking
dead as you know him, mate. Dead as you know him. But that was, but that's more character sort of stuff. Like, obviously, there were characters that I had a soft spot for that I want to hold on for my own nefarious uses.
There's definitely something to be said about Tim Tammons' journey into Lichdom. Maybe we can explore that in another campaign.
It's very possible that Tim Tammons is my next character. a lowly fishing referee turned lich.
Oh, God, I want to see the success story. I want to see the book on that.
I don't know if it's a happy tale, my friend. I think it's quite sad.
It's a tale of woe.
Well, you know, maybe that's another podcast. We just flesh out just
Tim
purely
Tammons.
Tim Tammons the whole way through. Tim Tammons and Colin Bismarck.
Yeah.
No. Anyway, so the one of the things I want to touch on to make a good story, to make a good world.
Yeah.
I am with everything I do in like characters, plot, world building, the entire thing. I am a thief of creative properties. So I will take stuff that I like from anything. So the entirety of Jim's story, as I said, was based on Westeros and Game of Thrones, right? From the top to the bottom. Some of the organisations exactly the same with a different name.
The copyright man is coming to swing the banhammer on you, mate.
he was hunting me down. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of wanting to make like a super unique, you know, these are all my ideas, and it turns out really bland. Because you can't be, you know, we're not full-time writers or anything like that with time up our sleeves.
Part-time at best. Part-time at absolute best.
So you can't, I don't think you have the time or energy to actually create a complete living thing without help.
Well, I'd almost like disagree where good world building is almost seamless. When you've got that idea that kind of just unravels, it's not a case of you sitting there toiling away. After a while, I'll just lose time to being able to do it, and it doesn't seem like a strenuous thing. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. It's just my experience.
No, I agree. I just think maybe you're more creatively minded than me, but for me, I need a starting point or an idea. It can even be like, I know it's going to sound really stupid, even like a song that I hear, and I'm like, not like, you know, I'm not talking like... not like that. But if there's like an instrumental song that I'm playing just during one of the sessions and I hear it, I'm like, oh shit, that actually slaps. And it gives me like an idea of something. Like, I heard this song a while back, I won't say what it is. It's just an instrumental, and it gave me like, literally this one song gave me this idea about like an entire province of like a forested elven area where I'm not going to get into it, but like almost a complete like world built off like 30 seconds of inspiration.
Well, I mean, that's like having a soundtrack and music in the background is definitely a pivotal point of showmanship during your DM sessions, because it kind of adds a little bit of immersiveness to what you're doing. But back to the world building aspect and how, you know, you're talking about people with kind of borrowing ideas off each other.
Correct.
Borrowing.
Giving them back.
It's almost impossible to not do that now with the amount of content that you're being absolutely bombarded with.
Yeah.
Through all kinds of media. Ideas are already going to have been done before, and I don't want to go ahead and be cynical here and say every good idea has already been thought of, because that's just not true.
No.
But like, popular things are good for a reason. Take like the world of Game of Thrones, which I'm going to talk blindly about because I've never watched it. But
ooh,
boo him off. But like, you're gonna take dribs and drabs from here. Yeah, I mean, on a lot more of a micro scale, there's been certain little encounters and things like I've copied through Critical Role, but it just like kind of retextured and reflavored them simply because they work so well, and it's. I feel like, you know, when you're playing pretty low stakes in your home game, you're not going to get the big man knocking at the door saying, give me back my content, or else. Like, it's harmless fun. And I mean, every now and again, you'll start unraveling some kind of story, and you get that little hint of recognition within other players, and they're like, oh, we know what you're fucking doing here.
Yeah. Well, that's the essence of what you said about finding something and then reflavouring it to your campaign. And that is, to me, that is the essence of world building. You're putting your spin on... Like, you didn't come up with the idea of a town being next to a river. Man, no, you didn't. So, you are going to have these ideas that are pre-made, and you've seen a million times before in Age of Empires 1, and the best game they ever made, and you're going to have these ideas, and then you put your own flavour on it, and that's where I get the excitement from. Is like I ran a bit of my campaign, just like it was only 3 sessions, I think, on a train, and I took the idea originally from Twisted Taverns and their railway train, but I threw my own bits into it, and that was the part that was really fun for me. And actually, just through that, I created probably my favourite ever NPC, who I've never got to play as a PC.
Percy von Hartenstein.
Percy von Hartenstein, the vampire. Mm-hmm. And he was not included at all in anything to do with the railway, as written in Twisted Taverns. But he became, even now, a pivotal part of the stories we're running.
He's been immortalised almost. And that's a good thing. I mean, if you really want to argue with the semantics of it, and of course it's like, oh, this story's 400 years later, there's no one else still be alive. Bitch, he's a vampire.
Yeah, exactly.
He lives for a while.
Yeah, I have heard that, not from you, thankfully, but I've heard from so many, vampires, mate, he'd be long dead. And I'm like, well, guess what? He's immortal. And they're like, well, I'll be like, he's an elf. Elves only live 200 years, mate. Not in Jim's story, they don't, mate. 500 minimum.
I mean, everyone's at the mercy of your own creativity because, it's the beauty of homebrew stuff. I mean, even source books are there and they explicitly state, this is a guide, you can work on what we've given you. But, if you want things to be a certain way, you can. I mean, you don't want to fall into the trap of using only the same NPCs across stories, but definitely a little bit of call between and throwback is nice. I go back to one of our first times and first characters we made, one certain half-orc bard by the name of Dangerous Dan McGrew. Any Red Dwarf fans out there, you're welcome. But he was just a staple, and being a bard, you've got your stereotypical horny bard who is just the confidence man.
So he was my first character after Hank Hill was Dangerous Dan, and I am not ashamed to admit that I was early enough on to have, yes, he was incredibly stereotypical. Borderline, uncomfortable at the table sometimes. And sometimes that border got really small.
Well, I don't know. You kind of got to pander to the crowd that you're playing with, and I feel like we are definitely on the more chillaxed side of what you can and can't get around at the table. And I mean, I think that's just lucky because you've kind of, I'm going to again say it, but you don't want to be making any of the players at your table uncomfortable. But he's a prime example of how you can take a character out of nowhere and just turn him into someone that comes by. What do bards do? They play music. Where would they be? Taverns.
Right.
New character, new story, new Jim story. We made our way down to the city of Stoneglade and at the Barn Owl Inn for one night and one night only. One Dangerous Dan McGrew just rocking it out on the guitar.
Yep.
And his dog Mulchy. It was just enough for us to all get a little hint of, I don't know, secondhand excitement about it. And it definitely was one of those moments that, because it was some little event that was happening there that night, and there was people around everywhere, and it's just down to immersive D&D, but that can all be.
Yeah,
I feel like we're talking more about character world building now than actual world building.
I was just gonna say, I think that was putting Dangerous Dan in that tavern again was probably the first one of those proper callbacks that we had, and because I remember doing it at the time, I thought to myself, I'm making this tavern, there's going to be a bard playing all this stuff, and I'm like, I could make it, now I have to make a new bard. I'm like, why not just plug someone in that I've already got that I like and I know how to play and I know what he does, and any
excuse to take the reins on the music in the background and put in a bit of Tenacious D as a Dangerous Dan staple song, which is neither here nor there, but is definitely enough to get everyone up and dancing.
Yes, it was a good night, a very good night.
And I probably would say even to that place. So put it down to world building. The city of Stoneglade was in the Jim Storian continent was part of the Empire, so it had a big sort of empirical military presence there. But was just this really, really nice, flavourful town. It was on a glade, it was just a bridge that connected to it.
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah, yep.
And it was the city itself had flavour. There was the Burnt Cove with the orcs just down.
Yeah, so the orcs had tried to sack it something. Again, time fluid. Something like I got really confused. DM, and you will fall into this problem of getting confused of what happened at what time in the past. So it was either 10 or 30 years beforehand. The Orcs tried to sack this city and they lost. They took a big L, but they never left. They just stayed in a cove just down and outside, and sort of an uneasy sort of, will they attack again? Will they not? Should we go and blow them all up, or is that cruel? And again, it wasn't, it was never meant to be anything more than the start of a little tiny session arc, right?
Yeah.
But it ended up turning into one of our players really, like, their cause really resonated with him, the Orcs down at the cove, and he ended up like befriending them, and I took that on board, and I sort of changed the idea of the Orcs, and they ended up helping at the end, in helping the city of Stoneglade in the end, fighting in this war, which we don't need to get into, but it was a mess.
Talking of tangents, bloody hell. I was going to start by, we talked about the inn, we talked about Dangerous Dan, but the inn itself was like a hub of expedition where a lot of things came from. We had the Clearwater family. There was just a lot of the stuff based around that tavern. Like, we went and helped one of the mills there.
And it was never supposed to be like that either.
It was never supposed to be like that, but we had the guy owning it, Briar Clearwater, his son Jane, who was a bit of a love interest for my character at the time, which didn't end too well.
Unrequited love.
But, like, it was just nice. It was one of those places that whenever, like, we were in town or anywhere nearby, we'd go out of our way. We'd travel cross-country just to stop back at that place.
Yeah.
Almost this really indebted relationship of, you help us, we help you, and there was always a beer sitting on the table there for us, and we were always the first person to jump into arms to try and protect the place.
Yeah. I think maybe this is a pseudo-tangent, this one.
Yeah.
But
fucking watch it, mate.
10 minutes later. I think in terms of your world building, this does apply really heavily. One of the best nights we had that really, the campaign was good to start, but it was very, like, as I say, this is the first time I DM'd something properly. It was a couple of, like, little, classic, I even hate saying this word, a couple of fetch quests sort of thing, just to get some money and get some information before we moved on to, like, bigger parts of the story, just a chance to level up a little bit sort of thing. But we had this one night where they had a wake at the Barn Owl Inn, and in my head going into this session, we were catching up anyway to get on the tinnies, have a couple of sherbs, and we're like, we'll play a bit of D&D. So I wrote up this tiny, this is what happened at the wake, the one important bit of information or something like that. Nothing too strenuous, but it ended up being probably one of the most fun sessions we've ever had, and the wake was the entire session start to finish. Like, the guys were just looking for people to talk to. I was making up stuff on the spot. We're all in real life and in game getting pissed. And it was just so much fun. And I think sessions like that where you take a step back and, you don't have to be Hercules and fight a Hydra every session are some of the best sessions we've had. Because it makes the world and the people so lived in just to take that time and do I guess kind of mundane, sort of everyday sort of stuff.
Mundane stuff. I mean, the fishing competition that Odin, one of our friends' characters, played, to that point, Tim Tammons, the referee of the fishing contest, could have completely slipped through to the keeper.
Yeah, that could have just been a survival check, roll, and done.
But it's like, it shows when your characters are enjoying, when they really want to try and sort of build some relationships. I don't know, another callback to a game that you got me onto not but a couple of months ago, but like Fire Emblem, the Three Houses one, where a lot of it is, you make friends, you build rapport, you build relationships and stuff like that. Yep. I'd like, I'm not the kind of person that would ever just be go out into the campaign and like the whole Jane Clearwater thing and like want to, find some girl in game or something like that. It's not like that, but it was really interesting having the relationship almost be like a living, breathing organism that changed based on what we did all the time, and it was always just like a one point of contingency is like, have I fucked up? What have I done? Have I not done something? Or have I done something?
And it didn't affect the actual like story plot at all, not in any way.
But it made the character feel more real because the relationships of the people you'd constructed feel way more real, and I reckon that's a really big for those of you who haven't clicked off yet. One of the most important things You've got to try and, again, this is going to be different for every audience, but you understand the assignment. When you're mates with someone for that long, and the group has been that close for that long, you kind of know what they're going to want to play, and what they're going to not want to play. Actually, I've got an opinion on something. I don't know what it's called. I forget what they call it, but I've talked about like implementing it in session zeros, and in a lot of home games, they usually do like a little write-up or like an agreement or something like that. I don't know if you've seen anything about this.
Like content, agreement of rules.
Content to cover, content that you
don't want to
might
talk
have
about.
some kind of trauma or things like that. I think we're kind of, I don't want to say blessed in a way to not have to worry about that kind of thing, but I feel like being so on the same page with the people that you're playing with, it's almost unspoken rules.
I totally agree, and I was actually going to say something really similar before you even brought this up, to do with the whole thing was the only time, even going back a step, the only time you're going to feel safe at a table is if you're all on the same page. The only time you're going to have fun is if everyone wants to be there and wants to be involved. No one wants to go and do their own thing or anything like that, and no one wants to not be there. They're just going for their friends. If you're on the same page, that it doesn't matter what you pull out, you can have fun with it. Because you're just hanging out, you're just friends, you're having fun. That's what you do.
Yeah.
So we don't play with strangers or anything like that. I know you, not strangers, but a different group you've played with once before. But yeah, it's that idea. If you, and I think you do this really well before we, like you say, we don't have like a rule set up or anything, but before we start what we're doing, we're all on the same page. We're very open and honest, and
got to be clear about the expectations, because we have fallen into this trap. This is a trap that's something that everyone has probably experienced at one point or another. Is you might realize that, oh shit, maybe my character's not the best fit for this campaign.
Yeah, of course.
You're playing a really super sad, angsty boy, and everyone just wants to get around and have some fun. And there's been a couple of miscastings for those particular roles, but yeah, it's just advocation for like a session zero, and that all comes back into the world building as well, because the clearer picture you paint of the world, of the themes of the campaign, and of the kind of things you're going to want to do, that will the people who are going to play will feed off that. And
so I'm a big proponent for, before the game, giving someone an idea of like, not like an exact material, like this is your one moment in the sun that you really want to do, but like, what do you want with this character to happen in this? And then they might say, oh, most people are going to say, I'm not sure, I just made up this character. So you figure out a basic idea of what they want to get into, and you put in your bit of the story.
I'm sorry to try to interject you there, but we have one particular person at our table who loves writing the entire plot of their character down before the session and the campaign's already underway. It's like, motherfucker, just write a book.
For real. This is your story, not our campaign.
So yeah, and that's again clear on expectations. But,
of course.
But going back to, I will say, a really good example of, I think, what I did when I ran the session of the Sunset Archipelago. So just again, to paint a bit of a clearer picture, I mentioned them before, you've got your Kobold Telia, who was a cleric, who was a trickster domain cleric. You had Jim Kingdom, a fathomless pact warlock, and a swashbuckling rogue, and you had Jax Blacktouch, who was an assassin rogue, and he was also a sorcerer.
Weird combo. I liked it though.
And so the whole plots behind those characters was obviously the kobold coming from the Fae, not really knowing where he is or what he was, kind of wanting to find his own little calling. And then you've got Jim Kingdom, who wakes up mysteriously with no heart that's been taken, only to figure out that he's not the only one with these pacts.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Davy Jones, yes, I know.
But the point is that's another point of contention for world building, and then Jax being an orphan, having met someone who was an orphan with at like later on in the story as well, like being part of this underground roguish company. So it was a chance for like, I really like being able to help characters grow and develop and explore their own plot lines, but also not let it overthrow the rest of everyone else's plot lines. Like with that, we were able to unite all the kobolds and saw Telia the kobold become this almost cultish god figure, which was incredibly funny to me, having armies and armies and armies of kobolds, even talking about a kobold trebuchet, of just putting the kobolds on these like little things and launching them at enemy ships. You got you with how your sort of relationship built with Arkvia the patron, and then Jax developing a little bit of humanity and finding sort of compassion in allies, and became your second in command quite quickly on the ship, and
actually became Jim Kingdom.
After
got rid of my name and retired at the very end. and he took over. And again, I know what you're thinking at home. This is a tangent, but for us, it isn't. This is world building for us because our world building comes from how we put our characters. It's a game about the players. It's not about you as the DM having. You're not there to live out your. Again, like you said, write a book if you want to do that. It's about how you put the characters into the canvas that you've made, and how you allow them to paint the picture with that canvas. That's what I'm a big fan of.
You give them the brush.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's a nice thing as well. Like even there's a throwback in this new campaign you've started running, mentioning Percy von Hartenstein, someone who we met on the train in our previous campaign, recounting details of a famous group of, sort of infamous group of adventurers that saved the city of Stoneglade and surrounding cities by an overtly like a dark and oppressive, seemingly oppressive force. But it's nice to have these characters kind of create ripples in the lore.
That is world building in essence. That is what it is.
And I love that so much. I reckon that's the reason that I most like this game. A couple of times, it's the sort of little thing you'll think to yourself as a DM, like actively while you're playing, that your characters might not even see is, I love going off script. If you guys veer off and go left and completely sort of abandon the path that I'd forged in front of you, that'll have a ripple effect in the world. If the person you were contracted to kill didn't get killed, that would result in maybe a city across the island being attacked. Or if you weren't able to protect this individual or stop them from signing a bit of legislation that would perhaps remove them from being an heir to their family's fortune or claim, it can completely rewrite how the story unfolds. And that's nice because you're almost playing as much as the players are when you're unsure of the future of how it's going to go down.
And I've remembered an amazing snapshot of exactly what you said, which is in a much smaller scale, was when you're on the train in my first campaign, and you guys, there was a murder mystery. It was taken from the railway, but I changed it up a little bit to make it more open-ended. So you made up your own story as long as you can justify who you thought did the crime. That was fine. You guys ended up apprehending the person who didn't commit the crime, but it was so well justified that they got arrested, and it ended up that person, because of this, came back and actually killed one of the players. I know it sounds cruel, but I brought him back, don't worry.
That is one of those nice moments because, if this person had been killed, or if we'd have, and this just ties back to the orcs as well. So we're doing laps around different places, but some of this stuff in the story would never have happened if not those tiny little moments. It's like
of course, the orcs brought him back, didn't they?
The orcs brought him back, and he became a champion of the orcs, and maybe the orcs wouldn't have come and fought with us at Stoneglade
if he hadn't taken that interest in him in the start. Motherfucker, that's active world building in the game.
You guys go out there, build a world. It's fun. It's really, really good.
It is fun.
And just here talking about this is getting me more excited for what I have in store in my next campaign. But
I can't wait. I'm so excited.
I think we've pretty much talked everyone's ears off enough for at least for now. But best believe I've had lots of fun sitting here talking about D&D, probably more than a grown-ass man should.
No, I completely agree. It's so much fun. Such a great outlet, wouldn't you say?
The best.
Yeah. So we can leave that one there. If you listened this far through to our first very tangent-led podcast, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, if you guys want to, send us any info of what we're doing wrong or ideas that you've had,
please don't be too harsh.
we're sensitive. All right. Or any stories that you've got of great snapshots of your world building. Because, as we say from the start, we never claim to be master DMs or master players. We are babies in terms of this. But, we just love it. So, let us know some awesome stories. Nothing better than, reading up on some crazy stuff that someone did in their game. So,
that's a little favourite moment of mine. You see these D&D horror stories or fun little moments and things like that. You've all seen them in your shorts. If you found your way here, your YouTube shorts, TikToks are definitely flooded by D&D shorts and all this other.
Yeah, and you're running low on them at that. Hey, we should leave it there, right?
No worries. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Gio. Much appreciated. See you in the next one. Damn it.